I knew something was off the second I stepped out my front door at 6:30 in the morning and saw a flock of birds circling my driveway like they were trying to warn me. I rubbed my eyes, blinked twice, and then just stood there, jaw half open, staring at my car. My black '97 Mustang, my pride and joy, was pink. Not just any pink. We're talking Pepto-Bismol pink, from hood to trunk, even the rims. Whoever did this didn't just spray a little graffiti. They'd painted every inch of my car with a thick coat of the most obnoxious color known to mankind. I just stood there, hands on my head, whispering to myself, "What the hell?" And then I heard it, that fake cheerful voice I'd know anywhere. "Oh, Xavier, what a bold choice for your car. So expressive." I turned slowly and found her standing at the edge of my lawn like she owned the property. Marilyn Larchwood, president of the HOA. 50-something, bleach blonde bob, always in a floral blouse and capri pants like she was headed to a garden party in 1962. Her voice grated worse than a belt sander. I stared at her, still trying to wrap my brain around what I was seeing. "You think I did this?" She smiled a tight little smile that never reached her eyes. "Well, it certainly didn't paint itself. But I must say, it looks so much more acceptable now. That black paint was just a little too aggressive for the tone of our community." I took a step toward her. "You're telling me you did this?" "Oh no," she said, waving her hand like a Southern belle fanning herself. "The HOA board voted on it. We decided your car's appearance was in violation of our aesthetic standards. Article 7, subsection C, non-neutral vehicle colors, aggressive modifications, and I believe the wording was vehicles that project hostile energy are subject to correction." I let that sit for a second. "You vandalized my car," I said slowly. "You committed a literal felony." She tilted her head. "We corrected the issue. You're welcome." Now, I knew Marilyn had always had it out for me. Ever since I moved in 3 years ago, she made it her mission to nitpick every little thing. My lawn was too long by half an inch. My trash cans were visible for 20 minutes too long on Thursdays. I used the wrong shade of beige for my shutters once. But this crossed into criminal territory. I didn't bother arguing. I turned back to my house, walked inside, and called the police. Officer Hensley showed up within 20 minutes, a younger guy with a buzz cut and the kind of expression that said he'd seen some weird stuff, but this was top 10. He walked the perimeter of the car, took photos, and then raised an eyebrow at me. "You say your HOA did this?" "They admitted to it," I said. "Their president is right over there." Marilyn waved like she was at a parade float. Hensley blinked. "She said they voted to paint your car?" She used the words "corrected the issue." He looked back at the car. "Did they touch the inside?" I opened the door and let him peek in. Even the steering wheel was pink. They'd gone full psycho. He let out a low whistle. "All right, that's vandalism. Doesn't matter if they're your HOA or your grandma. You want to file a report? You better believe it." By noon, the rest of the board was on my lawn. 5 of them stood in a half circle like they were about to conduct some sort of cult ceremony. Marilyn led the charge, naturally, arms crossed, lips pursed. "This is unnecessary, Xavier," she said. "You're making a scene." I laughed. "You painted my car pink. You made the scene." Next to her was Dale, a retired insurance adjuster who always wore socks with sandals, looking like he wanted to disappear. Then there was Luann, who mostly played parrot to Marilyn, nodding and mumbling. We followed protocol every 30 seconds. The other 2 were Steve and Barbara, both of whom looked like they regretted ever signing up for this circus. "You signed a contract when you bought your home," Marilyn said. "The HOA has the authority to enforce community standards." "Not like this," I replied. I held up the printed copy of our HOA bylaws. Nowhere in here does it say you can touch my private property. Especially not paint it without consent. This is vandalism, Marilyn. I filed a report. The police are investigating." She scoffed. "They won't press charges. We're a governing body." Officer Hensley showed back up an hour later with another cruiser. This time he brought Detective Morales, who clearly wasn't in the mood to play HOA games. She was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, and carried herself like she didn't suffer fools. They both spoke with me, then with the board. It only took 15 minutes before Barbara cracked. "I told them it was a bad idea," she shouted. "I didn't even vote yes, I just didn't want to argue with Marilyn again." Marilyn spun around. "You signed the vote sheet, Barbara. Because you shoved it in my face during book club." Detective Morales raised an eyebrow. "So you're admitting you authorized the painting of Mr. Everett's vehicle?" Marilyn folded her arms. "It was a collective decision. We're within our rights." "No, ma'am," Morales said. "You're not. You defaced private property. That's criminal mischief and possibly destruction of property, depending on the cost of repair." "I'll have our attorney handle it," Marilyn said. "You're going to want a criminal defense attorney," Morales replied, "because you're all being charged." The look on Marilyn's face was priceless, like someone told her the country club was being turned into a skate park. "You can't arrest an HOA board," she snapped. Morales shrugged. "Actually, I can." And then came the cuffs. All 5 board members were walked off my lawn. Barbara was crying. Dale muttered something about just wanting to review budgets. Marilyn? She kept hissing about how I'd regret this and that the neighborhood would turn against me. Spoiler, it didn't. My neighbor, Craig, came out with a lawn chair and a beer, laughing so hard he nearly fell out of it. "Xavier," he said, "you're a legend." After the cops left, I got a call from the HOA's insurance rep. Apparently, once charges were filed, their coverage got very interested in mitigating the fallout. They offered to pay for a full professional detail, interior and exterior, plus repainting. I said I'd consider it after I got 3 quotes from high-end restoration shops. And just like that, the board was down 5 members, Marilyn had a mugshot, and my car was being scheduled for a custom job on the HOA's dime. And you better believe I kept the receipts. The pink was finally stripped off the Mustang by the following Thursday, and I'd never appreciated a fresh coat of obsidian black so much in my life. The restoration shop did a hell of a job: new paint, deep polish, and they even reupholstered the steering wheel with stitched leather to replace the one those clowns had slathered in paint. All of it courtesy of the HOA's insurance, which, as it turned out, was now threatening to drop them entirely. I found that out from Glenn, the insurance adjuster, who called me directly and sounded like a man on the edge of retirement who no longer had patience for stupidity. "They filed a claim without disclosing the criminal investigation," he said. "Our underwriters don't like surprises, especially not ones involving felony charges." I didn't say much, just listened and took notes. At the end of the call, Glenn let slip that he was forwarding everything to the county prosecutor. "They're not gonna like this," he said. "Not when it involves community funds being used for what's essentially premeditated vandalism." I spent that weekend cleaning out my garage. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to be outside when the rest of the neighborhood started stirring. People were curious, some cautious, others amused. And they had questions. Lots of them. Craig wandered over first, wiping his hands on a dish towel and glancing toward the now empty house across the street where Marilyn had lived. She'd vanished the day after her arrest, and a for sale sign appeared shortly after. "You hear about the emergency meeting Monday night?" he asked. "No," I said, tossing a box of old extension cords onto the workbench. "What meeting?" "They're appointing interim board members. Whole thing's gonna be open to residents. You thinking about going?" "I'll be the first one through the door," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "You thinking about running?" I laughed. "Not a chance. But I'm definitely not letting another Marilyn take control." That Monday, the clubhouse was packed tighter than a holiday sale at the outlet mall. Folding chairs were dragged from the storage closet, and a few people stood along the back wall sipping from travel mugs like they were watching a courtroom drama unfold. A lanky guy named Brent, who I vaguely recognized as the HOA's treasurer, stood at the front trying to maintain order. He was clearly not used to being the one in charge. "Okay, folks, let's settle down," he said, tapping a clipboard against the table. "We need to fill 5 interim positions until elections next quarter. We'll take nominations from the floor." A few names were tossed out, mostly long-time residents with no interest in drama. But then a woman in the second row stood up and cleared her throat with purpose. Her name was Naomi, a retired nurse with a reputation for being the neighborhood's unofficial problem solver. "I nominate Xavier Everett," she said. I choked on my own breath. "I didn't volunteer." "You didn't have to," she said. "You're the only person here who's proven they'll actually hold people accountable." Half the room clapped. The other half turned to look at me like I'd been caught in a surprise election. I stood slowly. "Okay, let me be clear," I said. "I'm not interested in running this place. But if you need someone to keep things honest until the formal elections, I'll do it. On one condition: complete transparency. All meeting minutes made public. All spending posted quarterly. No closed-door decisions." A few people murmured in agreement. Craig gave me a thumbs up from the back. Brent nodded. "Sounds reasonable. All in favor?" Nearly every hand went up. That's how I ended up temporarily on the very board I just helped dismantle. Not exactly how I planned it, but I wasn't about to let anyone sweep things under the rug. 2 days later, I got a call from Detective Morales. "We pulled the HOA's financials," she said without preamble. "You might want to sit down." "I'm standing in the cereal aisle," I said. "Go ahead." "They used shared funds to hire a painting crew. Not a licensed one, by the way, some guy Marilyn's nephew knew. Paid in cash." I leaned against the shelf of granola bars. "That sounds shady even without the pink paint. It gets better. The same slush fund was used for a number of beautification projects over the past year. But the receipts? They're all handwritten. No business names. No itemized breakdowns. Think they were laundering money? Not sure yet. But the county auditor's involved now. And your HOA insurance company submitted a fraud complaint this morning." I whistled low. "Guess this goes beyond creative landscaping." That's one way to put it. The next board meeting was less crowded, but the mood was tenser. Brent opened with a statement about transparency and restoring trust, while I distributed copies of the financial review I'd requested from a local CPA friend. It wasn't pretty. Line items like miscellaneous maintenance and community morale? I said, pointing to one page. "That's where your dues were going." People gasped. Some cursed under their breath. One guy in the back muttered something about suing the past board for misappropriation. Naomi stood up again. "So what do we do now?" "We cooperate with the investigation," I said. "We freeze all non-essential spending. And we rebuild this HOA from the ground up." By the end of the night, we had 3 new subcommittees. One for finance oversight, one for legal liaison with the county, and one for revising the bylaws to eliminate vague language, the very loopholes Marilyn had used to justify her war on personal taste. Felt like a turning point. A week later, I got a summons to testify before the county commission regarding HOA abuse and resident protections. Apparently, my case had sparked similar reports from other neighborhoods, and they were considering legislation to restrict how much authority HOAs could wield without oversight. When I finished giving my statement complete with printed photos of my pink car, financial records, and a timeline of events, the chairwoman leaned forward and said, "Mr. Everett, would you be willing to consult with us on drafting reform guidelines?" I agreed, on the condition that they include a provision requiring third-party audits for all HOAs over a certain size and a formal complaint process that didn't begin and end with the same board causing the problem. By the time I got back home, Naomi and Craig were waiting on my porch with a 6-pack and a stack of printouts. "What's this?" I asked. "Drafts of the new bylaws," Naomi said. "And beer." "You're gonna need both." We spent the evening writing language so airtight not even a sneaky garden club tyrant could find a way through. No more vague aesthetic clauses. No more subjective enforcement. No more board votes without full resident review. And when the new bylaws were ratified a month later by a unanimous vote, everyone knew exactly why. Marilyn never came back. Her house sold to a young couple who installed solar panels and painted their door teal. No one said a word. The Mustang? Still gleaming. Still black. And now with a small sticker in the rear window that read, in neat white font, corrected this. Justice, as it turns out, looks best in matte obsidian. By the second month of my interim board appointment, I'd stopped expecting normal days. Between fielding calls from county auditors, revising the HOA's bylaws with a rotating crew of caffeine-fueled neighbors, and making sure no one else's property mysteriously changed colors, I barely had time to breathe. But I wasn't expecting to uncover a second firestorm, one that made the pink Mustang debacle look like toddler mischief. Started with a knock on my door just after 9 on a Thursday night. I was halfway through assembling a new shelving unit in the garage when Naomi appeared on my porch, holding a weather-worn manila folder like it was radioactive. "I didn't know who else to tell," she said, stepping inside and glancing toward the street. "I found this in Marilyn's old mailbox." I frowned. "You've been checking her mail?" "No," she said, holding up her hands. "The box broke open when they replaced the post. A bunch of letters and this fell out." "Look." She slid the folder across my kitchen table and opened it. Inside were photocopies of checks, over 20 of them, all made out to a company called Silverpine Consulting. Each was signed by Marilyn and approved by Dale or Luann. The amounts varied, but the total came to just over $70,000, all withdrawn from HOA reserves over the course of the past 18 months. I flipped through the pages, heart pounding. We never saw any of this in the financial summaries, because it was categorized under infrastructure evaluation, Naomi said. I cross-checked the dates with our maintenance records. There's no mention of Silverpine anywhere. "And you're sure this company exists?" Naomi pulled out her phone and showed me a website, barebones, one page with a stock photo of a hard hat and no contact information beyond a Gmail address. The domain had been created only 6 weeks before the first check was issued. "Looks fake," I muttered. "Even if it's real," she said, "we paid them $70,000 and have nothing to show for it." I copied the folder, scanned every page, and emailed them to Detective Morales with a brief summary. She called me the next morning. "Where did you find these?" she asked. Naomi found them in a broken mailbox. "Marilyn's old place." There was a pause. "Silverpine doesn't exist. We ran that name through the state registry months ago when we first started looking into the HOA's books. Nothing came up. No license, no tax filings, no permits." "That's a shell company." "So what now?" "Now we go federal," she said. "That's wire fraud and embezzlement. I'm forwarding this to the U.S. Attorney's Office." I hung up and stared at the folder. Marilyn hadn't just broken rules, she'd orchestrated a full-blown financial scam using neighborhood dues as her personal ATM. The fallout came fast. Within days, federal investigators arrived in unmarked cars, interviewing anyone who'd served on the board or had access to HOA funds. Brent, who'd been acting as treasurer since Marilyn's arrest, was cleared quickly. He'd only joined 6 months ago and had never seen the Silverpine transactions. But Luann wasn't so lucky. I watched from across the street as she was escorted from her house in a blazer and slippers, hands cuffed behind her back, her face pale with disbelief. A few neighbors gathered silently on their porches, saying nothing. The next week, the HOA received an official notice from the Department of Justice, a formal subpoena for all HOA financial records from the past 5 years. I turned everything over through our attorney, who I'd insisted we hire from outside the neighborhood. No more backdoor family connections. Then came the letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Marilyn, Luann, and Dale were being charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and misuse of community funds. The maximum sentence? Up to 20 years. Craig knocked on my door the next morning, holding a folded copy of the local paper. "Front page," he said, tapping the headline with his knuckle. "HOA fraud case expands as federal charges filed." I scanned the article. The story had gone regional. News fans were circling like vultures, and suddenly everyone wanted a quote from the guy whose car was painted pink. But federal charges weren't the end of it. The HOA's bank initiated an internal audit and 2 more skeletons tumbled out. One involved a landscaping contract that had been approved by the old board, $28,000 paid to a company that only existed on paper. The other? A security patrol service that had withdrawn monthly fees for over a year despite no patrols ever being seen. All of it pointed back to Marilyn. She created fake businesses, Morales told me during our next call. Set up checking accounts, funneled money through them, then withdrew it in cash. We're working with the IRS now. This could take a while to untangle. In the meantime, I called an emergency meeting with the remaining interim board members and a few volunteer residents. We needed to repair the neighborhood's reputation and fast. We can't operate without trust, I said. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're hiring a licensed third-party management company to handle all financial operations. No more in-house bookkeeping. Second, we're launching a community audit committee open to any homeowner who wants oversight. And third, we're drafting a motion to permanently ban any board member from using HOA funds without a public vote and posted invoice. The vote passed unanimously. The new management company came in 2 weeks later. They were sharp, efficient, and immediately flagged several outdated vendor contracts that had quietly auto-renewed under the previous board. We cut the fat, renegotiated rates, and suddenly our budget had breathing room. By the end of the quarter, we'd saved nearly $30,000. At the next General Assembly, I stood at the front of the clubhouse and read a statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office confirming the charges and outlining a scheduled court date for the criminal trial. There was no applause, just quiet, stunned relief. Then Naomi stood up. I know we've been through a lot, she said. But I want to thank Xavier. Not just for standing up when it mattered, but for pushing this neighborhood back towards something decent. We've been asleep too long. That ends now. People nodded. A few clapped slowly. It wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. After the meeting, I stepped outside and leaned against the railing, watching the sun set behind the rooftops. Craig joined me, sipping from a thermos. You ever think about just moving? He asked. Every day, I said. But then I remember, if I leave, someone like Marilyn moves right back in. He nodded. Well, I'm glad you didn't. We stood there for a while, listening to the cicadas hum in the trees. The neighborhood was quieter these days. No more surprise finds. No more cryptic letters stuffed in mailboxes. Just people slowly learning how to be neighbors again. And as for me, I was planning my exit. I'd done what I came to do, exposed the corruption, rebuilt the foundation, and made sure no one else would have to wake up to a vandalized car and a smug HOA president waving bylaws like they were law books. At the next election, I didn't run. I handed off the reins to a full board of newly elected residents, all vetted, all transparent, all voted in with open ballots and clear agendas. And I stepped down with zero regrets. But I kept the pink steering wheel cover. Framed it, actually. Right above the workbench in my garage. A reminder of what happens when people let pettiness turn into power, and what one well-timed police report, a few scanned checks, and a whole lot of community fire can do to stop it. The trial date was set for mid-September. By then, the sting of the Mustang incident had shifted from outrage to folklore. New neighbors would walk their dogs past my driveway and whisper, "That's the guy," like I was some kind of suburban urban legend. A few even asked for advice on handling small disputes, how to file information requests, how to challenge citations, how to spot the signs of a board starting to rot from the inside. But I wasn't interested in becoming the neighborhood's permanent watchdog. I'd done my tour. I cleaned house. Now I just wanted peace. Except peace had one more hurdle waiting. It started with an envelope. I found it wedged in my storm door one crisp morning in late August. No postage, no return address, just my name scrawled in sharp black ink that looked like it was carved rather than written. I opened it in my kitchen, expecting some leftover hate mail from the Maryland faithful. Instead, it was a single sheet of paper. At the top, a scanned copy of a deed. Below that, a note in uneven block print. Check the lot behind 2416. They buried the evidence. I stared at it. 2416 was a house that had been vacant for months. Ever since the previous owner, a quiet retiree named Mr. Kellerman, passed away. His kids had never bothered to list the property. The backyard backed up to a thin strip of undeveloped land that the HOA had long claimed was community green space, though no one ever used it. I wasn't about to ignore a tip, especially one that came with a cryptic message like that. I called Naomi and Craig over that afternoon. We all stood in the overgrown backyard of 2416, staring at the tree line that bordered the so-called green space. What exactly are we looking for? Craig asked, swatting at a mosquito. No idea, but someone wanted me to see it. Naomi crossed her arms. You bring a shovel? I did. We started near the rusted fence line and worked our way inward, keeping to a grid pattern like we were hunting for archaeological treasure. And then, just past a crooked oak tree, Craig struck something solid. It wasn't a rock. We dug faster, careful not to damage whatever it was. Within minutes, we'd uncovered the edge of a large wooden crate. Old, but not rotted. Someone had taken care to seal it tight. A few more minutes of digging and we freed the whole thing. The lid had hinges but no lock. Naomi lifted it cautiously. Inside were dozens of binders, each labeled with a month and year, stretching back more than 5 years. The earliest dated to just before Marilyn had been elected president of the board. I pulled one out and flipped it open. Inside were financial ledgers handwritten and detailed with entries that didn't match anything we'd seen in the official records. Payments to companies that didn't exist. Reimbursements for legal consulting that clearly never took place. Even a few entries marked resident compliance incentive, followed by names and dollar amounts. Bribes, Naomi whispered. She paid people to vote her way. Craig snapped a few photos with his phone. We need to get this to Morales. Right now. Detective Morales didn't say anything when we showed her the crate. She just opened one binder after another, her expression getting darker with each page. This is a record of every dirty deal she made, she finally said. And she buried it because she knew it would blow the case wide open. I nodded. You think this changes anything? Oh, it changes everything. We're talking about obstruction on a whole new level. These weren't just financial crimes, this is organized fraud, election tampering, and evidence concealment. The crate became the centerpiece of the federal case. Prosecutors revised their indictment to include a racketeering charge, which meant Marilyn and her cronies were now looking at even more time if convicted. The courtroom became standing room only during opening arguments. The government presented everything: the fake companies, the embezzled funds, the buried records. The prosecution even called a handwriting expert to verify that the ledgers had been written by Marilyn herself. The defense tried to argue that she'd been set up, that someone else had planted the crate. But when Dale took the stand and admitted that Marilyn had ordered him to get rid of the old books, the case was sealed. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. All 3 were found guilty on every count. Marilyn was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, Luann to 9, and Dale to 7. The judge called it one of the most egregious abuses of community trust she'd ever presided over. As part of the sentencing, all of them were barred from serving on any HOA or nonprofit board for life. After the verdict, I walked out of the courthouse into a sea of reporters. I gave one short statement. This wasn't about a car. It was about power and what happens when no one watches the people who have it. We watched. We spoke up. And we ended it. I didn't wait for questions. Back in the neighborhood, the mood was different. The fear was gone. Meetings were open, quiet, and efficient. The new board, made up of normal people with normal jobs, worked transparently and lived on the same street as everyone else. No more secret votes. No more shady deals. The Mustang had never looked better. I'd added a custom vinyl decal under the hood, resilient engineered by petty HOA drama. Craig and Naomi came by one evening with a gift, a framed print of the front page from the local paper with the headline, HOA Crime Ring Busted in Landmark Federal Case. I hung it in the garage just above the pink steering wheel cover. Naomi raised a glass of cider. To the end of tyranny, Craig added, and to never letting anyone paint your car without permission again. I laughed. I'll drink to both. We stood there for a while, not needing to say much. The air felt lighter. The street, quieter. The weight of years of corruption finally lifted. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept with my windows open, no security cameras blinking red, no copies of bylaws under my pillow. Just the sound of a peaceful neighborhood settling into something it hadn't been in years. Free.